Good afternoon. This is another episode of Miller Chat. It is July 2020. We are still in quarantine where we cannot be in the studio at this time as a group to do a show. However, I am happy that we have two guests on our show today. We have Fern Nissim, who's an artist, co-artist, and author, and Sue Fleishman, who is a co-artist of Fern's book, and that would be shown at the end, called Antilines Brave Adventure. Did I say that right, Fern?
Yes, you did. Good job.
I did? Okay, so we're here to talk about it, to help promote summer reading. Unfortunately, the library is not open, and therefore they didn't have the author showcase this year due to what's going on around us before we made nameless. And so I decided, why not promote summer reading, because people need things to do, especially children. Reading books will always be there, either in ebooks or physical books, to help grow your mind and develop and get ready for school in the fall, whether it's hybrid in the school or at home or both. Who knows? Well, anyway, let's begin. So, welcome to my show. And I'm just trying to get this stopwatch to go. Okay. I'm going to reset it and start it. Okay, there we go. Sorry about that. Okay, so Fern, why don't you tell us a little bit about why you wrote the story? What made you decide to write the story and illustrate it with Susan?
Right. Well, it's an interesting story. My dad actually wrote the original story in 1977 for my children when they were about 5 and 7 years old. And the reason was he was trying to tell the story of his family and his whole, the family's move to America from the mountains of Europe. They had to travel and go through all of these hardships to get here. But every time he tried to tell the story to them, they really didn't understand it. It was a little bit above their level of understanding all the what he went through, what the family went through. So he decided to put it into the story of a little ant, a little red ant, that is just tired of being made a servant all the time and wants to be free and see what freedom is really like. So he had written this for my kids a long time ago, as I said, in 1977. And I never really got around to doing much with it. I read it to the kids. They thought it was fine. And that was the end of that. But I always thought someday that I would illustrate it and create a book for my grandchildren. Well, fast forward, now I have grandchildren that are 5 and 7 years old. So I decided it was time to do something. And so what I've done is I've taken the original script, and it was a lot longer, and I put it into like a rhyme and played on the idea of rhyming with ant, the word ant. My dad wrote it originally with using a lot of words in there for playing on the word ant, like servant, like the ants are servants. Mm-hmm. And there's characters in the book that basically exemplify things of those time and obviously things of these times, like a tyrant and, an arrogant and all the different characters. And they always say ant on it. But I never was able to do the illustration exactly the way I wanted. And then I met Sue, and we were able to work together on it. And Sue can tell you how that all came about.
Okay, Sue.
Well, basically, I was sitting in Fern's dining room, and the two of us were talking about her little book, and we both had our art supplies out because we used to get together to draw and sketch and just enjoy the process of art. And I started making little stick figures and giving them little personalities with, eyes and eyebrows and mouths and moving around with gestural drawings. And she liked the idea of what I was doing. And I started playing around with the character, and I created Antiline, and she seemed to like that. And we went on to make more characters based on her dad's description of what the characters look like. And I used watercolor to do that.
Is it okay if I just show a page or so of the beautiful illustrations that we have here?
Right. Now, that one you're looking at is actually the map of Antiline's trip. And kids can follow her journey from the beginning of the serf ant colony. All the ants live in colonies. And as they travel through all the various colonies, and she has all of these experiences and meets all these little characters all the way along the way. And we have all the original art to share with you, because the fun part of this and the way that we worked on this, Sue and I together, is that Sue created the characters themselves and I created the backgrounds. So for example, I worked a lot on the botanicals and the background displays, but here's a picture, if you can see.
Oh, yes, I see.
There's Antiline. She's crawling away, and we had to put her into something that looks like she's going underground, because that's what ants do. And, and as she goes through the adventures, she actually meets, I don't know if you can see this, okay, she bumps into the flowers and all the different gardens that she goes to. So for that, you know, as Sue was creating the character and all these different positions and everything, I was creating the gardens that we would be going through for all of this. And she came across some various characters on the way. Now, I have some displayed over here. I don't know if you can see it. Let me just get this one off the board. You can't see it behind me. But this character is a very interesting character.
I see.
Can I just freeze?
Yes, I see that.
Sue, you want to tell that one?
Yeah.
Well,
Pretty
basically,
tall.
that tall guy on the right is an arrogant, and Antiline comes up to him. She crawls through the tunnel and she sees him and she wants to make a connection. But he's kind of snooty and he's not really interested in listening to her. So she's kind of looking up at him and he's basically ignoring her. And so that's what that particular picture depicts.
Wow, they're beautiful pictures that you both did together. You know, drawing, illustrating, colors are gorgeous. It's just beautiful. And regarding ants, did you observe ants?
Oh, absolutely.
Actually, I didn't.
I did a lot of reading on them to see how they move and all that. But Sue's got a great way of figuring out how to animate these characters.
Because they're not really moving around like ants. I mean, they're up on two legs,
right?
And they're holding things in their hands, and they're talking to each other, and they're waving to each other. So they're moving around like children. Yes,
it is.
The way that we did this, just to give you a sense of it, we went through different series of layouts. So, for example, we would kind of decide, you know, what the text was going to be on a particular page like that. And then Sue would create what she thought the direction, and we would talk about it, how the ant should be moving on that page. And then I would start sketching in the botanicals and the flowers to go behind her. So it went back and forth between us as we were both working on this together, and back and forth. It took all last summer to do it. So it was quite a job of time and love to really get all these different things done. And here's another scenario where different things are happening on that page. And children have to read the story to see what's going to happen to Antiline, because she has quite an adventure. At some point, she meets characters called the Magnificants.
Yes. You know, it reminds me of immigration in the early 1900s.
Well,
that's what it reminds me of.
It's interesting you should actually say that, because that's really what it's reflective of. And that was the story that my dad was writing about when his family came here in the early 1900s. And had to face adversity and all of that. And this also harkens back to the whole ancestry business that we're all into these days, about wanting to find out where our roots are from and understand a little bit more maybe what our grandparents or great-grandparents went through, or parents went through to come to this country.
Absolutely.
So, and I've been amazed, because the times that I've actually presented this before all this COVID stuff was going on, I presented a couple of times in different libraries and at bookstores. And it was interesting because I know that I remember one time in particular, there were some children that were from India or Pakistan, I'm not sure. And they were part of the group, and we were reading the story to them, and they were doing some drawings and talking about the characters and their experience. And the little boy turned to his mother and said, "Well, Mom, we didn't have to go through all that. Your family didn't go through all that, right? You just came over on an airplane here." And the mother started laughing, and she said, "Oh, no, we went through a lot of things like Antiline, not the same kind of things, but different kind of things."
Right.
And a lot of families do. And that's really what the story the purpose of the story really is to try to stimulate conversations with families to really start understanding and asking questions.
Yep. Well, I can relate to it because my family on both sides came from Russia, Mother Russia, during the early 1900s because of the pogroms, the anti-Semitic issues. Now they came here with no money and it was hard to get jobs, and they had to change their last names.
Right.
To fit in.
Right.
And now you don't. Right, but they had to learn the language. They had to learn the language, and they did.
Right.
And they worked hard for everything they had to do. It wasn't easy. Life was hard. Very hard.
But kids today don't realize that a lot of times. They think it all just happened miraculously, and they really don't understand. And really what brings a lot of that to mind is the whole immigrant issue that comes up a lot today in today's world. And I think maybe kids are more aware of it today than they were in the past, but they don't relate it to their own history and their own family unless there's an opportunity to stimulate the conversation on that. And one of the things I thought was so interesting is Sue actually had the opportunity to go out and speak to some groups about that too.
Basically, it was Fern and I were in a bookstore, and she was at a different part of the bookstore signing books, and I was in the back with a mother and a daughter, a very sweet young girl, and she told me that her teachers were doing an immigration section in school,
right.
And they were learning all about ancestry, and they were learning about different families and how they came over to the United States and just immigration in general. And she told me that her family came from Italy, and then they moved to the Midwest and then down to Florida. And the girl was learning more about her history. Fern and I also did a talk at an assisted living place in which the people talked about their experiences from countries all over the place. And when my husband and I were on a trip last year, we went to a wonderful museum in Antwerp, talking about the boats and who got on what ship and what it was like for the immigrants.
Hard, very hard.
Yes,
very hard.
Very hard. So, we've been very excited about the response that we've gotten from this. We've had some nice reviews on Amazon. The book is now available on ebook, and it's it's really made for kids, I would say, from ages 4 to maybe 8 or 9. I think the older kids can read it themselves. The younger ones, hopefully the parents would read to them and maybe talk to their kids and their children about their own family's history. It's a great opportunity to do that.
I think now that we're home more, people at home, this is a great opportunity. I mean, the play Hamilton just came on Disney, which I saw. It was very great. It was good. It just talks about where you come from, who's going to tell your story. Because it was about the American Revolution and the Constitution and so on.
Exactly.
And it says, who's going to tell your story? Somebody else or you?
Right.
That's
the truth.
And this book gives kids opportunity to learn about people through the stories that they tell you. That's
right. And in that same vein, we're now working on the second book in the series called Antiline's True Discovery. And in this story, just carrying the theme, basically, that everybody has a story to tell. And so now Antiline's learning more about the story of her family, what might be her family. She's not sure because she doesn't have a map with all of the specifics on it. Right. But the concept being that everybody has that story, and let's all tell each other our story. And the more we all tell each other our story, the more that we'll all be tolerant of each other. Notice the word tolerant. So there's a new character
right.
The tolerant. So and we started the illustrations on that. Let me show you a couple of them.
Go ahead, show us some.
Very excited about it. So do you have some with you there you want to show?
This is, can you see that? This is Antiline talking with a group of ants who want to learn more about their own families and to be able to kind of get together and start sharing their stories. So this is one of the pages in the second book. And Fern's got some more of those pages.
Right, so just to show you, we're trying to create a little environment. So here's the opening of the story. This is Antiline's little village where she lives now. I don't know if you can see it. Can you see it okay?
Yes.
And in the beginning of this book, here's Antiline again. She is very, very happy where she is, but she's wondering, she wants to know more about herself. Now she's free and she really wants to understand. So she talks to her friend Jubilant. Jubilant's a happy little ant, and she has a lot of ideas for her. And she tells Jubilant, I'm very concerned about my family. It's quite a mystery to me, and I want to learn more. So Jubilant says, I know what you need to do. You need to go to the ancestry. If you go to the ancestry, you'll see where all the history is of all the ants. So she shows her where to go, and they go on this path into the ancestry. And she takes her through this adventure, and that's where Antiline starts to discover her true self and to find out what her meaning is and what she wants to do with herself. And that's what that story is about. So we're just in the process of developing it. We hope it'll be ready by the fall. And then we'll be offering, actually we're offering it for free through Shrewsbury for the first 25 copies. If folks email to antiline1977@gmail.com. I don't know if you can put that on the screen at the end of the show.
Yep, copy wrong. Yep, I see that.
And they can eat. I also have copies of Antiline if you want to order the original Antiline Brave Adventure from me. I do have copies here in Shrewsbury. I'd be happy to drop one off at your house or whatever. We'll make arrangements for that. That book is $8.95. And also the new book, if you put in an order for the first 25 that order it before October 1st, I will be happy to pay for it for you, and I'll give you a free copy of the second one, Antiline's True Discovery. So wow. I really want this to get out. I really want kids to really have an opportunity to talk to their families about their family histories.
Well, being a third generation person in the United States from Mother Russia, I think that what kids need to learn, and I think this is one of the things they're talking about, how to get rid of racism. It's about kids getting to know each other, getting to have a conversation. Right. And I think that your two books would be great to start that conversation, because too often we tend to grow up, we tend to be conditioned to have these certain beliefs about other people, other culture, without actually realizing them, because everybody has a bias based on their experiences or wherever they came from. And I think these books help promote encouragement and knowledge about learning about each other up front, as opposed to being raised in a household of incorrect perceptions. And I think that's, I know that Shrewsbury is forming this committee, Diversity Inclusion Committee, about how to get parents and educators, students to talk about how to decrease or rid of racism and possibly other isms too.
And it all more tolerance.
Yeah, a lot more tolerant. But the thing is, what I think I like about these books is too often we want people to talk about their culture, and the latest research is showing that people don't want to talk about their culture; they want to tell their story.
Right.
I mean, yes, you can educate people about A, B, and C, and D, and E, and F, but people really want to just tell their stories.
Exactly. And that's what we're trying to do with this, is to open that whole discussion, especially in the second book, that everybody has a story. And that's where it starts, listening to everybody else's story and getting involved and being interested and really listening. And I think that's where the beginning of all, acceptance and tolerance is.
Mm-hmm.
It breaks down the barriers.
Yeah. And connecting after you start to understand what somebody else is going through and you shared your own story, you can make a connection.
Right.
Yes. So for people listening, especially children, do you have any suggestions about how they can write their own story in a book or a chapter book if they wanted to write, educate their fellow peers?
It's interesting because I had never thought about doing self-publishing or publishing my own book until I really sat down to think about the Antiline book and how I was going to approach it. And the whole process of publishing on Amazon and on Kindle is not very hard at all. I mean, anybody can really write a book and draw the pictures themselves and just get them into a PDF and put them into the format on Amazon, and it doesn't cost anything. So I think what I've been doing when I meet with children, which I hope I'll be able to do soon again out at libraries and bookstores, is get them to write their own story, whether they want to write it about Antiline or about anybody else. Write another chapter for me, write another part of the story. And it was very interesting to see, because the last library I was at was Boylston Library, and one of the children started writing his own story about Antiline's brother. He made up this whole story about Antiline now has a brother, and the brother had all these adventures when the brother was trying to get free from the servant colony, and there was this mean tyrant and so forth. And I shared this with my grandchildren, and the big question that they had, the 7-year-old asked, well, what's going to happen to the tyrant? Is Antiline going to go back and get the tyrant? Is the tyrant going to be friendly at some point? Is tyrant going to be a happy person and a happy ant instead of a bad ant or a miserable ant? Right. And the kids, their minds are starting to think about what happens with this. How can this evolve in a happy way? So it's interesting to see that, yes, it definitely stimulates their thinking.
Right. The little girl that I was working with that time said at the end what she wanted to see was to Antiline to retrace her steps, meet everybody that she met on the way that she was either afraid of or they didn't want to connect with her, and just say, this is where I'm at now. Not necessarily, not to be angry or anything, and not saying, here I am, but basically saying, this is this experience that I've had, just to kind of connect in some kind of way. That's what this little girl wanted to see in the second book.
Yeah, we were actually thinking
it was going to be book 2.
Right. We were thinking about a third book where Antiline does go back and retrace her steps once she's established herself, but we don't know yet. We'll have to see how the second one goes if we get that far. But yeah, it was a great idea. But all the kids that have heard the story have been motivated to think of their own. And that's great. And also to ask questions, which I think is the most important thing out of all of this, because oftentimes the parents don't think to tell the kids all the stories, or they don't think the kids want to hear the stories of their families. So this is a great point, a real conversation starter, I think, to get the kids asking questions about their own family.
Well, yeah, I mean, I've told a story to my son about where my family came from. I even wrote a memoir about playing baseball, of breaking the barriers of 1975, of girls being allowed to play. He's like, girls couldn't play baseball? I said, no, they could not. So I wrote it to educate and inspire girls to play baseball. Too often they think softball is the end all be all, but it's not.
Right.
So I think kids like to know about people's stories. They can relate to it. They can talk about the struggles.
Right. And
everybody,
one of the things I was going to say, one of the things I've done is I've asked children also to draw, because I think one of the best and most fun parts about this whole project was that when Sue and I really sat down to do this, we found out it was really a very creative process. We hadn't thought about it. I think this was the first time Sue had worked on illustrations, right, Sue? It's the first time I had worked on really drawing illustrations, and it's wonderful. It's fun. It's very, very super creative, and the drawing part of it, instead of, often books are done by computer. So to have a hand-painted book is something that's very unusual, and kids can do that too.
Trying to mesh our styles, because our styles are somewhat different. So what we tried to do is work together to modify things that we were doing so the drawings would come together.
Yeah, and I think that writing a story uses your right brain, not your left brain.
Right. And one of the things that I did for my grandkids that's worked out really well is I've made coloring pages out of some of these pictures for them. I've just taken the initial and then traced over just with a line drawing and sent, and they're off in New York somewhere, so I sent them to them and they color them in and they have a blast. And then they create all their own little side things happening in the little stories in the gardens and so forth that I didn't even think of. So it's just a great opportunity for kids to really get them stimulated and thinking about a lot of things.
And have you been in the schools as well?
I have not been in the schools yet because we were just heading in that direction when everything got shut down.
Yeah,
but I have been at several independent bookstores and several libraries so far. And then again at the senior centers, which is something we want to do more of, to get those folks talking about their own stories, which really are so many wonderful stories that are going to be disappearing pretty soon if we don't somehow get our hands around those.
And they want to tell their stories.
Yep. Well, yeah, I mean, if you look at people over 80, they survived World War II.
Mm-hmm.
You know, different
Yeah.
wars,
Right.
inflation, recession, race, all types of isms. And you know, they're the generation that survived and had to work hard
Right.
and had to buckle up, be
Right.
resilient. I mean, not everybody, but they have a different feel about the lifestyle that made them who they are.
Different generation, the great generation, so they say, right? The
Yeah,
greatest generation. Yes.
right. And then you got baby boomers, you have, I'm in Gen X, and then you have the millennials and Gen Zs, the young
Right.
kids. The Gen
Exactly.
Zs are the people born after 2000. They're the first generation to be homeschooled, so to speak, from a pandemic. So
That's
that's going
true.
to be another story. People can write a story about the pandemic.
Oh, I'm sure there'll be lots about that one. We have some of our own that we're working on actually independently. Both
Mhm.
Sue and I. Right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we have another few minutes. Is there anything that you else wanted to touch? We have about 4 minutes left.
Well, we could read a page from the book, just a little bit, because I think there's a couple of pages that are really fun. There's one in particular that I wanted to share with you where Antiline is actually, she's already escaped, okay, and she's already met that arrogant we told you about, and so now she's taking a snooze on the back of a great big bee.
Mm-hmm.
You can see the bee up there.
Yes, I see that.
Yeah, she jumped onto the back of the bee and she fell asleep on the bee. And then all of a sudden, she was taking a snooze on the bee's soft back and she dreamed that they hit a bump. And to her surprise, she woke up in the grass. No honey, no bee, just a lump. And oh, my head, groaned Antiline, touching the spot and straightening out her antennae. And looking around at the strange new hill, she wondered, where am I? Suddenly, Antiline heard some loud noise, and she turned to see where it came from, and to her surprise saw 100 fat ants marching to the beat of a bass drum. Soldiers, thought Antiline as she hid in the brush. She peeked to take another look. They were all dressed the same with white aprons and hats. Why, in my country, that's called a cook. They were singing about all kinds of food, roast beef, corned beef, and hash, and waved their antennae in the air and wriggled their funny mustache. This is the colony of exotic gourmets for all that love good food. For delicious wines and cheese soufflés, you always must be in the mood. We cook it and eat it all day long. All must be participants. The only ones that matter here is us, the restaurants.
Mm-hmm.
Rubbing her antennae together, she swept a tear from her eye. I can't cook and I don't eat very much, she said. I must leave now, she said with a sigh. So that gives you an example of some of the fun little ant words that we came up with and how her little adventure continues as she goes on her travels.
Okay, so why don't you tell the viewers how they can get a copy of your book?
Yes, you can get a copy on Amazon, Antaline's Brave Adventure, and it's on ebook. If you're a Kindle Unlimited, it's free, of course, and also, or you can order it on Amazon, or if you want to just email me at antiline1977@gmail.com, and I have a book. I have books here I can sell you.
Also,
And of course,
there's
1977.
a Facebook page called Little Red Ant Books, in which there's lots of little postings about Antiline, and people have written.
Oh, how adorable.
Red Ant Books.
Mm-hmm.
That's at Facebook.
I was just going to say, it's Antiline 1977 because that's the year it was originally written. Antiline 1977 at gmail.com. Yes, Little Red Ant Books.
Okay.
We hope that if folks order it, that they'll write a review. We love to get reviews, and any input is very well received, and we're thrilled to have your input.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Fern and Sue, for coming on my show to talk about your book, Antiline Brave Adventure.
Antaline's Brave Adventure. Yes, there it is.
Yep. Thank you for coming on, and
Yeah.
thank you, and also thank you for coming on this nice, beautiful summer day. And I hope that our readers will get in contact with Fern and Sue to talk more about their illustration and their stories. On behalf of Miller Chat, have a great day. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Bye-bye.
Stay safe.